the North Atlantic in the 9th century, and the only tool that matters is a small piece of crystal held up to a gray sky. No compass, no map, no sight of land in any direction, just the heave of gray water and the groan of timber under your feet. You are standing on a deck that is maybe 16 paces long, and everything you know about where you are going lives in what you can see, feel, and remember. The crew is watching you. They are not watching the horizon because there is nothing there to see. They are watching your hands, waiting for you to make a decision that could carry them to Greenland or drop them into an ocean with no bottom and no name. This is the moment the stories never quite tell you about, the long silence between landmarks when the world becomes only sea and sky. Here is the promise I want to make to you before we go any further. Viking navigation was not magic, and it was not luck. It was a systematic human skill built from generations of attention, and it is still inside you right now, quiet and unused. You carry the same perceptual inheritance that let a small wooden ship find a green coast hidden behind 1,000 miles of open water. This is a species story disguised as a history lesson. The Norse are just the example. The truth is about what human beings are capable of when we have nothing but our senses and our patience. Because here is the thing, nobody tells you about the great age of exploration. The people with the maps and the instruments stayed close to shore, while the people with nothing but memory and observation crossed oceans. That contradiction is the first loop I want to open with you. A civilization with charts and compasses hugged the coastline, and a people with neither sailed into the open Atlantic and found islands that had never been marked on any parchment. How does that even make sense? The second loop is simpler. And it is a puzzle. You are standing on that deck. The sky is sealed with cloud for the 9th day in a row, and you need to know where the sun is. Not the sun in the sky, because you cannot see it. The sun behind the clouds, the hidden reference point that tells you which way is east. There is a way to find it, and the answer involves a stone that does something almost unbelievable with light. 2 loops now. Open and waiting. One is about why mapmakers stayed home while the unmapped went out. The other is about a crystal that could see through clouds. Before I close either of them, we need to understand what the Norse were actually up against, because the scale of that ocean is something our climate-controlled lives have quietly erased. You are reading this in a room where the temperature is managed, where the light is managed, where the floor does not move. Now, imagine the opposite of that. Imagine the North Atlantic in the first millennium, a body of water that swallows ships whole, that can change from flat calm to a wall of water in the time it takes to eat a meal. The wind does not blow toward Greenland. The wind blows in circles, pushed by the turning of the planet, and the currents move in their own slow wheels. To sail from Norway to Greenland, you cannot simply point the bow west and hold it there. The ocean is a moving surface, and your destination is moving with it, and every hour you spend guessing wrong pushes you further into emptiness. Here is what most people think happened. They think the Norse had a sunstone, a magical crystal that pointed north like a compass, and that this stone made the whole thing possible. The Sunstone shows up in the old stories, the sagas, the written memories of the Norse that were set down long after the voyages. In one of those tales, a king pulls out a sunstone, holds it up to an overcast sky, and names a hidden sun that no one else can see. A crystal that turns gray light into direction. A king who sees a hidden sun. The myth is vivid, and there is a kernel of truth inside it. But the real navigation system was layered, ancient, and it is waiting for us just on the other side of this pause. Subscribe now so you do not miss the moment where maps and memory finally collide with the great blank ocean. And in the comments, tell me, before this video, did you think the sunstone worked like a compass? Type the word sunstone if you ever imagined that, because we are about to walk into something much older and much stranger. It is a beautiful image, a piece of crystal turning gray light into direction. And it is true that certain crystals can do something remarkable with polarized light, which we will come back to. But if you think a single stone explains how a ship full of people crossed the North Atlantic and hit a target the size of a small island, you are missing the real story. That detail from earlier, the one about maps and instruments versus memory and observation, it is about to matter. Because the sunstone, even if it worked perfectly every time, could only do one thing on a gray day. It could tell you roughly where the hidden sun was. It could not tell you how far you had sailed, how fast you were moving, whether a storm was building behind you, or when to turn and trust the westward run. A compass gives you a direction. It does not give you a position. The Norse did not have a way to measure longitude at all, and latitude was a matter of careful judgment, not calculation. So how do you find a coast you cannot see, moving across an ocean that will not hold still, with no instrument that can tell you where you actually are? The answer, when you find it, is stranger than you would think. It is also older than the Norse, older than ships, older than the idea of a map itself. But to see it, we have to leave the deck for a moment and look at what human beings were doing long before anyone ever built a boat. Our ancestors hunted animals across open land where there were no trails. They followed prey that could move faster than them, see better than them, smell the air for danger from a mile away. A human being cannot outrun a deer. A human being cannot outsprint an elk. So how did we feed ourselves for the hundreds of thousands of years before we had weapons that could kill from a distance? We persisted. We watched. We learned to read a landscape the way you read a sentence, finding meaning in the bend of a grass blade, the direction of a bird's flight, the faint print of a hoof in dry earth. A hunter learns that a broken twig is not just a broken twig. It is a message about what passed this way and when. That is the skill the Norse inherited. Not a map, not a compass, but an old, deep, ancestral way of paying attention. When they sailed into the open Atlantic, they were not doing something brand new. They were doing something ancient, something their ancestors had done on land for thousands of years. Only now the landscape was water, and the prey was a coastline. Let me show you what that actually looked like, because this is where the story stops being about the Norse and starts being about you. You are out on that gray ocean, and you have no compass. You have been sailing for days, maybe weeks, and you need to know if land is near, so you stop looking at the water and start looking at the sky. You notice that the clouds are behaving strangely, that there is a patch of brightness in the overcast where the sun should be, even though you cannot see the sun itself. That patch of light is not random. A thin layer of cloud lets the sun's position shine through as a faint glow, and an experienced navigator can read that glow the way a hunter reads a blood trail. The brighter the patch, the closer you are to the hidden sun's true position. It is not exact, but it does not need to be. It tells you roughly where east and west live behind the gray, and then you notice the water itself. The waves are not coming from the wind that is hitting your face. They are coming from somewhere else, a deep swell that moved past you for days, and that swell is telling you about the ocean's memory. Swells travel from distant weather systems, from storms that happened on the other side of the world, and they move in straight lines across the sea. A navigator who has felt enough of them can use their direction as a rough current, a highway hidden under the surface. You look up again, and there is a bird. Not the gulls that stay near the coast, but a seabird that flies far out to sea and returns to land at night. If you see that bird in the morning, heading out, you know land is behind it. If you see it in the evening, heading back, land is the direction it came from. This is not instinct. This is knowledge, passed down and refined. Do you see what is happening here? Every single sign, the cloud glow, the swell, the bird flight, is a small piece of information. Individually, each one is almost useless. A patch of brightness could mean 100 things. A swell could shift its direction. A bird could be lost, but a navigator does not read one sign. They read all of them at once, building a composite picture out of fragments, the way your brain builds a three-dimensional world from two flat images on your retinas. That composite reading, building a world from fragments, is what makes the navigator's mind so remarkable. And it is a skill we have largely forgotten. If you want to keep uncovering these lost systems of human genius, subscribe and walk this path alongside me. Tell me in the comments, what surprised you more? That a bird's flight path is a map, or that clouds can glow with the memory of land? This is the integrated system the Norse actually used. The Sunstone, if they had it, was one input among many, a single thread in a web. The sagas give us the stone because it is dramatic, because a crystal that finds a hidden sun makes a better story than a man who stares at clouds until he knows where he is. But the real instrument was not an object at all. The real instrument was a human mind, trained and attentive, reading 1,000 small signals and weaving them into a direction. And that is the part that connects directly to you, because that instrument is not extinct. It is dormant. You have the same system inside you. You use it every day without noticing. When you walk into a room and instantly feel that something is wrong, you are reading the ancient signals. When you know the weather is changing before the forecast tells you, you are reading the cloud shadows and the pressure in your ears. When you wake at 3 in the morning and feel completely clear-headed, that strange calm of being alone in the dark, is not insomnia. It is your body remembering a time when being awake at that hour meant you were the one watching for danger. The skills the Norse used were not unique to them. They were human skills, sharpened by necessity, and they are still in your nervous system, built into the architecture of your attention. The reason you do not feel them is that you have never needed them. The compass, the map, the GPS, the weather app, they have all made that ancient instrument irrelevant. But irrelevant is not the same as gone. Let me give you a third layer, because I want you to feel how deep this inheritance goes. Think about the earliest human migrations when our ancestors walked out of Africa and spread across the entire planet. They crossed deserts, mountain ranges, oceans that they could not have known existed on the other side. How did they do it without maps? Without any way to mark the route they had taken or the route ahead. They did it the same way the Norse sailed to Greenland. They read the land, they followed the rivers that always led somewhere, the mountain passes that opened into valleys, the coastlines that curved toward new horizons. They learned that certain plants grow only near water, that certain rocks mean certain soils, that the stars wheel around a fixed point in the northern sky, and you can use that point to keep your direction when the land gives you nothing. The Norse were not the inventors of this system. They were the inheritors of it. Their ships were new, their iron tools were new, but the way they navigated was older than human language. It was the way we have always found our way. And when I say we, I mean the species, the whole long line of us that survived by paying attention. Here is a question for you, and I want you to actually answer it inside your head. When was the last time you went somewhere without knowing the route in advance, not glancing at a map before you left, not checking your phone halfway there? I mean, walking or driving into a place you had never been with no plan, no destination locked in, no way to call for help if you got lost. Most of us cannot remember. That experience has been so thoroughly outsourced that the idea of it feels almost reckless. We are the species that crossed oceans, and we have become a species that cannot navigate a shopping center without a blue dot on a screen. Something was lost in that trade, and I do not think it was just convenience. I think we lost touch with something essential about being human. The confidence that comes from knowing you can find your way. The quiet competence of reading the world directly without a buffer. Our Norse ancestors had that. Our hunting ancestors had that. And I believe we can still remember it because it is written into our bodies. Let me take you back to that ship for a moment, because I promised you I would close that loop about the Sunstone, and you deserve the full picture. The stone is real. There are crystals, certain forms of calcite that can act as a polarizing filter. When light passes through clouds, it becomes partially polarized, meaning the light waves are no longer vibrating in every direction. They are vibrating mostly in a specific orientation, and here is the strange thing. A crystal that polarizes light can sort those vibrations. If you look through a calcite crystal at a cloudy sky and rotate it, the brightness you see changes. And the pattern of that change can reveal the position of the hidden sun. This is not magic. It is not even that hard to reproduce. Modern researchers have done it, and yes, in the right conditions, a stone like this can genuinely find the sun behind an overcast sky. But sunlight under clouds is not always polarized enough to make this work. The effect is strongest around sunrise and sunset when the light has to travel a longer path through the atmosphere. In the middle of the day, under heavy cloud, a sunstone might give you almost nothing. So even if the Norse had these stones, and there is good reason to think they did, they could not have relied on them as their primary instrument. The primary instrument was the web, the cloud glow, the swell, the birds, the wind, the memory of where the sun should be at this time of year, the feeling of how far you had come. A navigator carried all of that at once, and the sunstone was just one more input, useful when it worked, discarded when it did not. That is why the myth of the Sunstone is so seductive and so incomplete. It takes one element of a very complex system and pretends it is the whole story. It is the narrative equivalent of saying you can drive across a continent because you know how to read a road sign. No, the road sign helps, but you also need to know the rules of the road, the behavior of other drivers, the feeling of the car, the map in your head. So I want to close that first loop now, the one about map makers staying home while the unmapped went out. It was never a contradiction. It was a difference in approach. The civilizations with charts and compasses had built their wayfinding into objects. They could write down their knowledge, hand it to a stranger, and send that stranger off with a tool that did not need to understand itself. The Norse built their wayfinding into people. Their knowledge could not be written down because most of it was not the kind of thing you can put on a page. It was sensory, experiential, passed from navigator to navigator in the doing of it. You cannot describe the feel of a swell in a book. You have to feel it over years until it becomes part of your body's memory. That is why they succeeded where the mapmakers stayed near shore. Not because they were braver or better, but because they had a different kind of tool. A tool that was not made of wood or brass or parchment. A tool that was made of attention. That tool, made of attention, is what we've been tracing through the fog, layer by layer. And there is still more to feel than to map. Subscribe if you want to keep walking these forgotten corridors of human perception with me. The story is far from over, and I do not want you to miss what the next discovery reframes. And in the comments, drop a word or a brief memory, something your own body knows that no instrument could ever measure. I read everyone. Now let me put this all together for you because we have reached the convergence and I want you to feel the full weight of what human beings were doing out there on that water. You are standing on that deck, 9th day of gray sky, and you have no compass. But you are not lost. You know the sun is somewhere behind the clouds, and you know roughly where because you have been tracking its position all season, watching how it rises and sets a little further north or south each week. You have a picture of that movement in your head built from a lifetime of watching. You feel the swell under the hull, that long, slow roll that is coming from the southwest, and you know it has been steady for 3 days. You checked it against the wind, and the wind is not matching it, which means the swell is not local. It is a deep ocean current, carrying its own direction, and you have learned to use it as a subtle compass. You see the cloud glow, that faint brightness where the sun should be, and you glance at the position of your ship's shadow. Even though it is a barely there thing in the diffused light, you notice a seabird, its flight pattern telling you it is heading out to feed, which means land is behind it. You count the hours since you left, you measure the distance in your memory, and you make a judgment. You turn the ship west. You commit to it with everything you have because there is no way to check if you are right until green appears on the horizon, and by then, if you are wrong, you are days too far to correct. This is the moment right here that separates the navigator from the passenger. This is what our Norse ancestors did, and it is what our hunting ancestors did before them, and it is what your own nervous system is built to do even now. The confidence, the risk, the acceptance of uncertainty that moves forward anyway. That is the inheritance. That is the belonging. That is who we are as a species. We are the species that crossed oceans with nothing but attention. We are the species that found islands hidden in the middle of an empty sea, that populated a planet, that walked from horizon to horizon before there were roads to walk on. The compass is a tool. The map is a tool. The GPS is a tool. But the instrument, the real instrument, is older than all of them. And that instrument is overgrown, not gone. The pathways are still there. The neural wiring still intact. It just has not been used in a while, the way a muscle forgets its strength until you pick up something heavy again. I believe it can be remembered. I believe a part of you knows how to do this, has always known, and rises toward it when you watch the waves or look at the stars. So here is what I want you to take from this. You are not the descendant of people who were rescued from the world by technology. You are the descendant of people who read the world directly, who crossed open oceans and empty lands, who survived because they could see what others could not. That is not history. That is your inheritance. The same ocean is still there, the same sun, the same horizon. And the instrument your ancestors used to find their way across it is still built into you. Quiet, patient, waiting to be remembered. The only question is whether you will ever need it again, or whether it will stay dormant forever, an ancient skill circling in your blood like a bird that has forgotten its migration. Maybe that is the real loss of our age, not the maps, not the machines, but the forgetting itself. A species that no longer knows it can find its own way. A species that has handed its deepest competence to tools it does not understand. If you ever feel that loss, that strange pull towards something you cannot name, pay attention to it. It might not be nostalgia, it might be memory.